Now, Delhi High Court has held that permitting illegally intercepted messages and audio conversations as evidence will lead to arbitrariness and promote scant regard for fundamental rights of citizens. The court made the observations while setting aside an order to frame charges against a man for allegedly facilitating MBBS admissions at the Patiala College in exchange of bribes. The court said that an order for interception could be issued on either the occurrence of any public emergency or in the interest of public safety as per Supreme Court's judgment. I am joined on the broadcast by two guests to discuss this issue further. Mr. Prashant Mali, lawyer and cyber expert, and also Mr. N.S. Napinai, a Supreme Court lawyer and cyber expert. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me on this discussion. And what we are looking at essentially is something which has come up again and again in terms of, privacy issues. And we've seen, of course, there are strong debates and strong arguments from both sides. But essentially what the High Court has pointed out over here is about illegal interceptions and how it encroaches upon the fundamental rights of citizens. Now, some people might argue that, law enforcement agencies sometimes exercise these rights in order to, probably get some leads in their investigation. But if we look at this latest observation which has come from the High Court, it has clearly said that if there is such illegal interceptions, it shows scant regard for fundamental rights. We'll start with your observations first, Mr. Mali.
This is the observation. Then I think there are tons of family law, family court cases where divorces are contested and, wives and husbands have distrusted each other and they are with electronic evidence, specifically the video-based evidence which they have recorded without consent. So, and this is in our private domain they have recorded. So I think this will have a definite impact on such kind of cases which are pending in the court. I think this judgment from Delhi High Court needs to be reviewed or been appealed properly, and a wider bench from the Supreme Court needs to decide on this, because this is a very important matter. Because in one side you say that CCTV is the best evidence, and one side, if we say that it impinges the privacy rights of the person, yes, it impinges. But what are the conditions at which they get, they are infringed? Needs to be clearly mentioned. Like what happens when it is in private place, what happens when it is in public place, what happens when the authorities do it, and what happens when the consent or consent taken or express consent is available. So all this needs to be clarified properly. Then only I think there is some existence of law about recording this would be in public domain, and the confusion would not prevail.
Right. Thank you for your views, Mr. Mali, and Ms. Napinai, beg your pardon for my earlier error. But what do you have to say about this, ma'am, where the Delhi High Court has clearly said that illegal tapes cannot be held as evidence? In fact, we've heard this again and again. In fact, the courts have clearly said that some of these interceptions may be used as leads for investigation, but cannot be used as corroborative proof in terms of actually presenting the case of the prosecution in court. So, where do you stand on this matter? Because this, of course, brings in the issue aspect of privacy, but also does it in any way hamper or hinder investigative agencies when they're looking at actually cracking a case?
Yeah, I believe that this is a very important decision which brings in a clarity to the issue of what is permissible and impermissible in terms of surveillance. This is not about private parties and their litigations, etc. It takes into account a much larger issue of what is permissible when it comes to government agencies or law enforcement agencies resorting to surveillance and using that in evidence. Now, what the Delhi High Court has relied on is Section 5 of the Indian Telegraphs Act. It's a legacy enactment, and it has tried and tested case laws which talk about what are the checks and balances that are needed. And pursuant to case laws that evolved, rules were also framed under this, and the rules clearly set out what are the checks and balances and what is permissible and impermissible when you want to resort to surveillance. The distinction under Indian law is actually very interesting in terms of the usage of illegally collected data. The interesting part is, just to juxtapose it with the US laws, for instance, the US courts, when it dealt with the issue of privacy and surveillance, set aside the recordings which were supposed to help the arrest of a person dealing in bulk in drugs. Even in a serious case like that, where the law enforcement agencies resorted to recording of the phone call of the drug smuggler without his knowledge and without following due process, the arrest and the case were set aside. In India, in general, the manner in which you collect information does not militate against the authenticity or integrity of the evidence.
Right.
So, to that extent, the Delhi High Court has also brought in the
Right.
balance to say it may be used as a first step, but you still have to prove the authenticity and
Right.
integrity.
Right.
And that cannot be done by using illegally collected information. And most importantly,
Right.
reining in illegal surveillance
I
is
will.
the crux of the decision, and I think it's a really important decision on that.
Right. Ms. N.S. Napinai, thank you so much for your views. And Mr. Prashant Mali, we'll have to leave it there.